Good to see you again, Warren.
Nice to see you too.
Mining Indaba 2016, impressions thus far?
Certainly not as busy as previous years, but I think that's to be expected, given the environment.
It's almost like the shrinking of the mining economy is seen as shrinking of the mining Indaba.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You used to have to jostle for lunch,
Absolutely.
Now you had your pick. That's always a good sign.
But with dire times comes opportunity, and you guys have seen a good 2015. A lot of sales, a lot of companies moving their second-hand stock out.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an excellent year for us, and 2016 is off to a very good start. I think, no doubt aided by the weak rand. About half our equipment sales end up offshore, so we're seeing a lot of strength on the buying side, where South Africa's contracting. There's certainly demand in other areas. And
highlights from 2015?
I think highlights in 2015, definitely we kicked off the year with the liquidation of Pella Plant for ABSA, and that was an excellent result. I think we achieved over 50 million in gross asset sales, 30,000 views, and something like 4,000 bids on that auction. So certainly that was a good way to kick off the year. And you saw continued growth, in terms of our mining clients and adoption within Savannah, Anglo-American, Royal Bafokeng and others.
And people are really come to terms with the online platform and getting stuck in there?
Yeah, it's just the easier way to do business. There's a lot of efficiencies online in terms of not having to move the assets, attracting global bidding, and just standardized process, and the ability, I think, to track everything very transparently. Governance has become a big theme, as you've seen, particularly for institutions, and that's the focus of where we play. And certainly the financial institutions and the major mining houses and construction firms are looking at ways to increase transparency and governance, and we're able to provide them with real-time tracking and bidding, right down to kind of who viewed the asset and how many views it had and how many bids it had, a list of all the registered participants, and exactly when they bid, and down to the last second, when that bid was placed, and was it a normal bid, was it a proxy bid, and I think that, coupled with higher pricing that we're seeing and a fully managed process, is just continue to drive our adoption.
So you've had been some exciting last-minute bids on equipment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got an upcoming auction in Botswana. We've now held a number of very successful online auctions in Botswana. We did Kuprick and Discovery Metals back in November, and we're now doing the Fengu glass plant on the 25th of February. That's a very, very sizable liquidation there. It's attracting a ton of interest with a lot of overseas buyers. We interestingly also have had a number of agricultural auctions, and have another one coming up in March for over 100 implements. Not surprisingly, given where agriculture is, there's a lot of supply, so pricing is key. And more recently, we've actually we've moved quite aggressively into the maritime market. We sold a vessel last month down in Durban, and we have another two $10 million container ships coming on auction on Feb 25th. They've arrested vessels in Durban Harbour. With what you've seen in the container rates globally, and just the utilization rates of these commercial tankers, we're expecting more of those. And I think the global outreach of our platform has just been consistently proven, and it's starting to attract more and more different verticals.
So as you guys grow, what are some of the operational opportunities and challenges that you come across?
Basically, for us, it's just to get a fair perspective of what is being represented to the buyers outside. And you asked the question earlier about the sellers is also, they're into the online, but the buyers are also getting more and more comfortable with online bidding. It was a market that they had to get used to, where they are now. And like Warren alluded, we've got a lot of interest buyers from all over the world. So operationally, it's, if a guy sits in the States, we'd like to give him as much as possible information the first time around. That's the prime operational focus. be it a picture, be it a video that they might require, we take that, we send it down to them, and they don't have to incur the expenses to come to South Africa and do a physical inspection on it. And that's basically, it's Africa. It's not always as easy as it is in the States. You normally sell stuff that might not necessarily run at that state, so you have to wait a little bit, but that's basically the major challenge that we've got here.
Absolutely, and growing the business in these new markets must be a very exciting time for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we built a very good platform and a great base. I mean, all of our back office operations and technology is done in Cape Town. We've got a very strong technical team, and then we have guys in the field that are actually visiting the locations remotely. These are all disparate locations in the middle of nowhere. They've got handheld inspection reports. Everything is done on an iPad application, and as soon as they capture it, it goes online. There's a ton of analytics and pricing support around there to help them set prices and help sellers understand market conditions. And I think, from an operations standpoint, we're able to scale very well because we've built the business very carefully on the right foundation, and we've invested very heavily in technology. One of the things that you do see in the auction world, particularly in the physical auction world, is that technology is typically a grudge spend, because it really is being asked for by the seller. It's not something that's being volunteered. So to build these websites with CRM systems, analytics, tracking, data capture devices, inventory management tools, it costs a ton of money and requires a lot of focus. And I think for us, it's our ticket to the game. Our view is if you don't have the world-class tools to compete globally, then don't even go into this business. And I think that's been a major reason we've been able to grow as we have.
So you're able to bring the product almost to the guy's boardroom to see exactly what it looks like from varying angles.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, Greg, I'll give you an example. When we catalog any particular asset, everything is done on a drop-down, so the data's standardized, and then the system will classify it as a dozer, an excavator, ADT, whatever it may be, and then we take all the data of who's viewed, bought, or bid on a similar asset, and it matches it accordingly. So we're not kind of spamming you and saying, hey Greg, we've got an auction on Feb 25th. We're saying, actually Greg, we've got an auction on Feb 25th. I know that you've bid on Caterpillar excavators of this particular kind, and we actually happen to have another two. Are you interested? And a lot of that fuels conversions at the end of the day. And certainly buyers like it because you're making their life easy and very streamlined. The other thing that we see, we shipped to over 20 countries last year, and the reason we're able to do that is myself and Ariella, who's the co-founder of ClearAsset, we both come out of international markets, and we've put a lot of emphasis on the logistics and the shipping and the transportation, the freight forwarding, which we manage on behalf of the buyers. When you've got guys who are dropping big checks for $1 million from the UAE or the US that have never transacted in Africa, it's a black hole for them, and that we need to give them a lot of comfort in terms of how to manage all of those processes.
What are some of the pitfalls, a bit of the red tape you encounter?
Certainly things like understanding the VAT requirements of every country is key. We work very closely with our accounting firms, and also just understanding, confirming really that the assets are being exported, following up on the paperwork, because we obviously don't want any manipulation with customs. So we're very kind of rigorous in terms of what's required when guys want to export, both from the seller and the buyer. We're also very rigorous on payment. We've got a line in the business that there's either money in the bank or lines, because we're moving huge amounts of volume, and then obviously big dollars flowing through our accounts, and we can't be releasing equipment throughout Africa unless we have exceptionally tight controls. So that's a learning curve, but I'd like to think we've certainly kind of a hell of a long way in terms of managing a very safe, secure, trusted kind of process for buyers and for sellers.
And where's most of the equipment coming from, and where's most of it ending up? And
Neels, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, look, we sell from all the major mining houses in South Africa, but then you also go to your bigger contractors, guys that work on the mines. So that's a big supply of equipment, and then depending on which equipment you take to market is where the end destination is likely to be. There's also some engine emission protocols that need to be adhered to. Certain tier engines cannot go into the States, cannot go into the UK because of the way and when it was built. It's being controlled by the local governments there. So then they will basically take it to Australia maybe, to Thailand maybe, Turkey, Romania. The UK and the Americas is good, and then obviously Dubai, Jordan, those places, that's where the heavy equipment end up.
Yeah, you know what the internet does very well, Greg, it's a good sifting mechanism. So the equipment that should be suited to overseas markets, and particularly with the weak rand, is being driven there. Those will sell to overseas markets. The things like vehicles and scrap material, or assets that have reached the end of life and are redundant, will be sold locally, as well as some very good, well-maintained equipment that will be sold locally and into Africa. So, our business is about finding the right end user and matching the right asset to the right buyer, which the internet does exceptionally well.
And what's the next step for online auctions? If you look 5-10 years down the line?
Look, if you go back kind of 15 years, the physical auction industry had always dominated. It's been around for over 100 years. It was very established, and people said no, but buy online. Well, we sold machines upwards of 100 million rand on our platform. So people transact on the internet. They like the benefits, and the growth is there. So I would expect that it's just a continuous kind of evolution. None of these technologies are revolution. Everyone thinks they're going to change the world. The reality is you need a lot of handling and process around them to make them work. So it ends up becoming more of an evolution than a revolution. But I must say the pace of adoption that we're seeing and the growth is certainly very exciting.
I want to add on to that, to give you a prime example, is on our agricultural auctions. We sold basically everything that's sold on the auction to outside of South Africa in agricultural sense. So to carry on with what Warren says, it's just evolving. More people is getting used to the online idea, and more people is getting comfortable to it, and that's why I think it's the trend, but it will just go upwards in maritime, agriculture, and mining and construction.
And the tax of taking equipment out of the country, there must be a lot of loopholes to jump through.
You know what? We obviously take that stuff very seriously, and we make sure we very focused on compliance. If there's a foreign buyer, they need to demonstrate proof of export and actually giving us all the documentation that those assets kind of got down to port and were created and went on a vessel before there's any kind of VAT exemption. So, I think that's also why the big institutions and the banks like working with us. We're very focused on managing it. It's not in anyone's interest in the industry or for us or for our sellers if anyone's trying to take shortcuts.
So the auction itself is only 1% of what you really do, and most of it is logistical, back of house, making sure everything runs smoothly.
Yeah, the internet's a very good enabler, and if you don't have all the pieces around the trade to make it work, then really you can't run a successful online auction. A lot of people think it's just a website and post it online, and these days you can probably download bidding software online and launch a website pretty quickly. But if you don't have 5 or 6 significant components around the trade, through settlement, collections, shipping, logistics, inspection, cataloging, pricing, verification, CRM, and you don't have all of those pieces in place, then quite frankly it becomes very difficult to deliver strong results for sellers.
And dealing with hackers in the online space?
Look, we've, from the beginning we've been using a world-class team in Stellenbosch and very focused on internet security and maintaining the best protocols. They've invested heavily in that area. So everything's encrypted, it's password protected, and we're constantly kind of focusing on best practices in the industry, liaising with people in the States who lead us in this, and making sure that from a technology perspective we're kind of setting the pace, and we're the industry leaders, which I think we've demonstrated in the South African context.
Speaking of industry leaders, you must have seen a few come and go trying to get into this space.
Yeah, there've been a lot of companies that are in this space. It requires a lot of capital and a lot of focus to get it right, you know? And I think many of them underestimate what's involved. And the other thing is, you know, it requires a specialist DNA and focus. You know, the type of people we hire, our processes are very distinct to how a physical auction runs. And I think unless you have those ingredients, you really can't deliver great results for sellers. So, you know, we pride ourselves that we're quite distinctive and we're very specialised and focused in what we do.
And you'd have to have a multicultural approach to deal with different personalities from around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. We're lucky that you know, Ariella speaks 5 languages, and certainly it makes a difference. And you know, right through to having all our terms and conditions translated into multiple languages. If you go to the website, they'll be there, you know, in Chinese, and you know, we cater for the UAE market, and we convert everything to Arabic if they need it in terms of bills of sale and terms and conditions. So, you know, we play in the international markets, so we're very focused on that.
So what are the big ticket items going to the UAE?
The biggest ticket items, I think,
Caterpillar dozers.
A lot of Caterpillar dozers, excavators.
Yes, that's the Komatsu in the Caterpillar markets.
And what sets those two brands ahead of the pack?
I think well maintained and very rugged. You know, it's a tough environment in the UAE.
And also the backup space. When you take something back there, you'll find it easier to get some space and equipment and components if you need it on that specific machine. So that contributes also heavily there. It's a rugged machine. It's built for the area, but if something breaks, you know, in your own country you can buy space for it. Whereby with other equipment they're catching on, but they're not yet there.
And if you look at America, Europe, what's the state of online auctions in those regions?
Look, I mean, they're very well established. Like South Africa, there's not a lot of very strong players. There's kind of 1 or 2, you know, because the others have kind of fallen away and sifted out. But in terms of a process, you know, I think it's become kind of the de facto standard. And certainly companies like Ritchie Brothers that have been around for, I don't know, 70, 80 years that are, you know, been physical auctions, you're now seeing, you know, something like, you know, half their transactions coming through online mechanisms, and they've invested very heavily in the online world. So, you know, I think the established players have recognised that it's not going anywhere, and better to ride a horse in the direction than it's going.
And in terms of why people are getting rid of the equipment, is it normally defaulting on bank loans or closing down operations?
Greg, it's a combination. I mean, part of it is a default liquidations, which we're certainly kind of privy to. The other piece of this is, you know, from a maintenance standpoint and a safety standpoint, most of the big mines have 3-year replacement cycles. So, you know, they maintain the equipment exceptionally well, which is why it's sought after. It does have a lot of it high hours, but it's still in good condition. And, you know, they focused on replenishing and replacing that equipment after the 3-year cycle.
So South African equipment has a good reputation overseas, presumably then?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the operators in South Africa, the established mining operators are very seasoned, and some of the best engineers in the world, the best technical support in the world. So the equipment's got a very good name.
It's part of a huge cycle that when the mine buys it, they buy it with a certain service maintenance plan that comes with it, which the buyers outside know it's applicable, and then they also know that maintaining that equipment once that warranty has expired is in place. And I think that makes a difference. Even if you sell a machine with 35,000 hours on it, you still know that it's a running machine, and your repairs and replacements might be limited.
It's almost like an auto-mark guarantee.
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Any exciting auctions we should be looking out for?
Look, you know, certainly coming up in February, we've got a very big sale, as I said, in Botswana. We've got the marine vessels, we've got a whole bunch of other mining and construction equipment from the likes of Anglo, Sibanya, and you know, so Harmony. So I think that'll be a very interesting auction. We've got a nice upcoming auction in Ghana in March. And the other great development is we've recently launched ClearAsset, which is a daily marketplace where any assets that haven't sold on ClearAsset, they remain on the website and people can make offers on those assets. And dealers can also upload their own inventory. So if a guy's got 1 or 2 machines, he can upload the equipment for free. He can expose it to a global database, and bids are made through us, and we manage the negotiation and the escrow process, and that's getting a lot of adoption globally. So we're very excited about it, because particularly for some of the bigger equipment, it may not sell on an auction, but 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later there's a particular project and someone suddenly has demand for it. So the longer you can expose that equipment online and market it, certainly the better, and that's getting a ton of traction.
Are you looking at expanding any other arms of the business, financing, insurance?
At this point we've got our hands very full on the transaction side. We couldn't be happier with the way the business is growing. Between our scrap auctions, our equipment auctions, our maritime auctions, our agri auctions, as well as clearlist and rollout into different countries in Africa, we've got our hands full. Obviously things like financing are a logical extension of the business, and at the right time we plan on rolling that out.
How's the drought affected the agricultural industry?
A lot of it's been very hard on farmers, which is upsetting. They come to us to sell their equipment, and we see farms that have been around for 50, 100 years closing, and farmers packaging and selling all their equipment, which is obviously a very sad state of affairs. It doesn't look like it's going to get better in a hurry, and certainly from our side we just try to do the best job we can. To the extent we can find buyers in pockets of Africa where they haven't been as affected, that certainly helps it.
There must be a tremendous amount of opportunity in Africa which doesn't have as well-established online community.
There is a great opportunity in Africa. I think you've got to be very selective. As we said, we've got to manage all the pieces in terms of settlement, inspection, collections. Those are sometimes challenging in Africa, and also the transportation and logistics. Getting the assets down to port. There isn't as an established kind of rail and shipping and transport network. So these are some of the things that we manage. But we love operating in Africa, and this is home. We understand the terrain, and that's our focus. Is kind of how to penetrate both South African market and Africa.